Hello, everyone. We are focusing on Mongol Eurasia and its aftermath. We'll be looking at the foundation of the Khanites founded by Genghis Khan. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about him today. We'll move on to different Mongol empires in the Middle East and in Russia. We'll talk about the foundation of the Ottoman, the Ming Dynasty, as well as Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia as we move into Vietnam. So take a look at the key concepts, focusing quite a bit on innovation. We're focusing on expansion of new empires, luxury goods, the spread of culture, including literature, art, scientific and science and technology. Fun, as well as social structures shaped by class and caste hierarchies. We'll be looking at that in the Mongol Empire as well as Japan. Let's dive in with the rise of the Mongols. And just to give you an idea of the geography of where the steppes were, the nomadic people of Mongolia before 1000 spoke different Turkic languages. And the nomadic groups depended on different resources. There's no farmland, so what they're looking for are places where they can travel with their herds, usually cattle, sometimes horses, sometimes sheep and goats. Just depends on the location. And for the most part, they're a pretty strong organization. There's a hierarchy headed by a single leader or a Khan, but all Khans had to ask the council to ratify decisions. This council was made up of very powerful families. European and Chinese sources note the movement of Mongols into Central Asia around 1000. The homeland was mostly steppe grasslands with very few rivers and trees. And again, what's pretty important is that there were people within the Mongolian area who spoke Turkic languages. I know I said that before, but I'm saying it again because it's pretty important. They didn't actually speak Mongolian. The various groups formed complex federations that were tied together by alliances, which came through marriages. And this is pretty important when we start talking about Genghis Khan's parents as well as Genghis Khan's family. He had 4 wives, so we'll be talking about them. Women from prestigious families often played an important role in negotiating these alliances, and women were very powerful within the Mongol clans. Wives and mothers of rulers traditionally managed the state affairs after the death of a ruler. And they also took part in the selection of a successor, usually working to secure a relative to the new position so they would still have some power. Mongol groups were so strongly tied together through family. And they're a pretty tolerant group as well because they're very accepting of other religions. The term is actually religious pluralism, where it's not just, hey, we're this religion, but if you want to practice yours, that's fine. There's a tax. It's different with the Mongols. They're actually more, hey, we believe that our religion is correct, but we acknowledge and respect that you believe your religion is also correct. We'll all get along. It's fine. Which was very progressive, all things considered. Mongols in the beginning worshipped nature spirits who were prayed to for protection. Within the families, shamans had the special task of mediating between the deities and the Mongols. Within, there were also Nestorian Christians preaching among the Mongols, and there were also 2 basic social classes in society. You have ordinary Mongols and then the families of the chiefs. So social classes really aren't that distinctive yet. The Khans were thought to communicate with and represent the sky god, who transcended all cultures and religions. Khans were thus conceived as universal rulers who both transcended and used the various religions of their subjects. So again, this is part of why they're so tolerant. Administrators drawn from Islamic and Chinese worlds, and intellectual knowledge is taken from conquered kingdoms as they begin expanding. Because as you guys know, at first they're just pastoral nomads, but over time they're expanding, they're conquering, they're taking over. Mongols lived in felt tents called yurts that could be packed up or assembled quickly, hence why we'll be singing the song all about that yurt. It's a great song, you will partake in it. Just saying. Chieftains were allowed to collect taxes whenever they wanted to. Mongols largely lived off of their own animals and hunting. Now, here's the thing, guys, they're nomads. They're not actually killing their animals for food, they're surviving off of the milk and blood. Bleeding animals, not enough to weaken them, but enough to use them for food while keeping them alive, became common. It is actually a custom that is still done today. Before 1200, Mongols and their neighbors were quite peaceful with each other. That will change, though. Trade and cultural exchanges flourish under Pax Mongolica. You guys remember Pax Romana? Well, same thing. They protect merchants as the merchants are traveling along various trading routes, specifically the Silk Road. But over time, the Mongols realized, hey, if we can protect them from other people, we can probably expand and begin taking over. And that is where we get Genghis Khan. So, some things to think about. In which ways were the Mongols a typical pastoral society, and how does it all change? How did Genghis Khan create a massive land empire before his death? Let's talk about it. Between 1206 and 1234, under the leadership of Genghis or Genghis Khan, the Mongols conquered all of North China, and they were actually a threat to the Southern Song. And this is how the Southern Song do collapse. Khan was born Temujin, the son of a chieftain of a small band, and Temujin's mother was actually from a different society. She's from a different group, and she was actually, there is some dispute over how she and Genghis's father came to be married. Some stories say that she was traded as part of an alliance deal, and it was their marriage that solidified the alliance. Other stories say that she was actually kidnapped, and that's how she came to be the wife of Genghis's father. Very important to remember that, though, that she is from a different tribe, because I'm going to come back to that before I wrap up with Genghis Khan. Temujin, aka Genghis, would use an alliance with one group to attack another band. And he was chosen as a leader because he was the most qualified member of the family to lead the band. And between 1206 and 1265, the Mongol realms were united because of the Khans of the Golden Horde, the Chagatai domains of Central Asia, and the Il Khan all recognized the authority of the Great Khan in Mongolia. And in this case, you have Genghis Khan. His achievements, he managed to unify the tribes in 1206, and he chose officials based on talent, not necessarily his family. He borrowed written scripts, so he didn't actually make it, but he did take it from the Turks. He created a uniform legal code, he reorganized the military, and he created policies on handling and integrating conquered people. Now, this sounds nice, but generally the policy of will you be integrated, will you be welcomed, is does your head come above the wagon wheel? And if the answer was yes, your head came off. If the answer was no, it was generally because either a woman or male or female child young enough to be integrated into the Mongol tribe. Under Genghis, his code, take a minute to look at that. It's pretty severe, but consistent. He used cruelty as a weapon, and some areas never recovered from Mongol destruction. Under him, all of northern China by 1220. So the Jin Dynasty that we discussed before, gone. He made examples of the towns that resisted, and these towns were burned to the ground, and everybody died. So the Mongols have an interesting policy. If you surrender, you will live. If you fight back, you will die. And those of you that survive that initial battle will kill you after. As a result, later on, towns would just simply surrender when the Mongols came. And the Mongols conquered Persia in 1221. So, what's pretty important, guys, they were determined to conquer as much land as quickly as possible. And their most important military advantage was their ability with horses. After the Jin Dynasty was conquered, Genghis, and he did this every time he conquered a region, he appointed a governor from among the Mongols. And local religious practices never had to change under Mongol conquest. Again, they're a pretty tolerant group. Because the Mongols also used local rulers, they didn't have to leave a large Mongol force behind after a conquest. Genghis died in 1227. And there is one thing I do want to talk about with Genghis. 0.5% of the world's population, and this is just the men, 0.5% of the male population in the world are a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. That is 1 in every 200 men is a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. And this is because, in addition to his wives, Genghis Khan also had mistresses, concubines, unfortunately, prisoners of war. That today that would be considered a war crime. Um, and as a result, the number of children he had is completely unknown. The children that he recognized, I'm going to pull up an image of Genghis Khan's family tree. The children that he recognized as his from his wives are numerous. We're not talking about prisoners of war. We're not talking about mistresses, concubines, um, women who exchanged time with Genghis Khan in exchange for money, for food, for survival. Um, but this was a way for Genghis Khan to really show how powerful he was. And one thing that Genghis Khan did that was pretty abnormal for the time period, his first wife was actually from the same tribe that his mother was from. And during an attack on a Mongol camp, the men escaped. There were about 800 men who escaped, but there weren't enough horses for everyone. So the men left the women behind with the ultimate plan that they would be rescued. Well, Genghis Khan's wife was among the group of women who were left behind. She was taken back to the tribe that Genghis's mother was from, and while she was there, she was forced to marry a ruler of this tribe. 8 months later, Genghis Khan rescues her from this tribe, brings her back. 1 month after she's rescued, she gives birth to a son. Because she was forced to marry, taken as a wife to somebody else, it is very, very unlikely that Genghis Khan was the father of this child. And this is a time where a woman's purity and virginity were prized. This is a time where if something unfortunate like this, if a woman was assaulted in this manner, either A, it was her fault, and a husband would actually have the right to say, okay, we're not married anymore, you're done, you're gone. Or B, it was such a common occurrence that it was never really talked about. And that obviously doesn't wipe away the trauma, but this is the time period where it's considered, well, things like this happen, we'll move on. But Genghis recognized that child as his own, and he never ever publicly acknowledged that there was even the slightest possibility that this child was not his son. As a result, his first wife would rule the empire in his place when Genghis Khan went out on campaigns, and he would take his other wives with him, but he would leave his first wife in charge, and that really shows the respect and the love that he had for her. So if you look, this is the Khan family tree, his sons, and actually it's his first son right here that probably was not his biological son. This is the reason that he actually did not appoint this son as his successor, because he knew that even though he said, "This is my son," there was too much doubt among his officers that this probably was not his son, and that's why Ogadai is going to be our next topic. Ogadai became the new Khan. Um, After Genghis dies at 60 years old, his son Ogadai is elected to be the new Khan. And in the 1230s, the Mongols attacked and subdued Russia. Before they attacked any more European territory, in 1242, the Mongols halt. During Ogadai's reign, the Mongols created a postal relay system which allowed for communication throughout the realm. And this is actually used by horses, so this is the original Pony Express. Over time, however, the Mongols do begin expanding again. So you've got 1234, the Song still rule southern China. The threat from the Mongols is still very, very real. In 1236, Batu leads soldiers and attacks Russian territories. In 1241, Ogadai dies. His son Gyuk becomes the new Khan and kills the last Abbasid caliph in 1258. He dies in 1260. The Seljuk Turks are defeated in 1253, and it's ironically enough the defeat of the Seljuk Turks that will lead to the rise of the Ottomans. We will talk about that later. And after, I'm going to go back to the family tree slide for just a moment. Ogadai dies. This would be his nephew. Or sorry, Guyuk dies. His cousin, my apologies, becomes the new Khan. So we're going to go back here. Guyuk dies in 1260. Now we're going back here. Monkey becomes the new Khan. And now we're back. In 1258, Hulegu, the brother to Monkey, conquers Baghdad. And then Monkey dies in 1259. And we're going to jump back real quick in just a second. In 1260, Hulegu's army is defeated by the Mamluks in Egypt. This is the first time the Mongols actually lose a battle. But there's a reason why this is very important. So we're here. Monkey dies, and he has no children. He actually dies fairly young. But I don't know if you guys know what this name is. That is Kublai. There are a lot of different spellings. When you see his name, it'll be with a K. Kublai Khan should be, anyway, in theory, the successor. But he's not. It goes to Hulegu. This will become a problem. I want you to take a look at the various Mongol empires. You've got the Empire of the Great Khan, which will become the Yuan Dynasty, the Chagatai, the Ilkhan, and the Golden Horde. The Mongol Conquest. In 1279 is where we're going to start. What you need to know is that the empire is always sort of loosely kept together. And after Hulego's army is defeated by the Mamluks, which is the first time again that the Mongols actually lose a battle, Kublai is named a successor, but not everybody wants him to be the next Khan. And under Kublai, the Mongol Empire will expand and it will ultimately change because the empire that we've been discussing collapses in 1260. The Great Khan Empire that Genghis founded. The ruler of China at this point is Kublai Khan. And he conquers the southern Song in 1279, and he's able to unify China under his rule. He founds the Yuan Empire, the capital is at Beijing, but he declares himself the Great Khan when the others refuse to accept him. And what he actually does is he takes what was his grandfather's empire and merges it with his own. So guys, you gotta love this. Does not inherit the empire, starts his own empire, forms it with what was his grandfather's empire and becomes the second most famous Mongol empire in their entire history. But please tell me why your homework is not done. I'm just messing with y'all. But seriously, that's pretty impressive. Under Kublai, many changes begin happening in China. After 1279, the Yuan attempt to extend control to Southeast Asia doesn't quite work as well as they want it to. Annam and Champa, pardon me, which eventually become Vietnam, are forced to pay tribute, but an expedition to Java fails. Historians point out a number of factors that led to the Mongols becoming such amazing warriors with a very impressive military, how they were able to conquer such a vast amount of territory in such a short time. And the factors: better bows, technique of following a volley of arrows with a deadly cavalry charge, and superior horsemanship. Guys, the Mongols could do anything on horseback: sleep, eat, hunt. And this started when Mongol children were very young. As soon as a child was able to walk and hold himself up, he was immediately put not on a pony, but on the back of a goat or a sheep to start learning how to ride. From there, progressing onwards and upwards. Another reason for their success is their ability to learn new military techniques and then to adapt to the environment they were in. They adopted new military technology as well, and they incorporated non-Mongol soldiers into their armies. Their reputation alone was quite impressive, as well as the reputation for slaughtering anyone who would not surrender. Kind of makes you not want to fight back. I don't know. If that was me, if somebody's like, hey, this guy's coming, and if you don't surrender, you'll die, and he's killed everyone, I think I'd be like, hey, come on in, I'm making dinner, help yourself. But again, that's just me. The Yuan Dynasty. Under Kublai, who finished conquering the Song in 1276, he made it a point to rule China as a Mongol. He tolerated Chinese culture, but lived quite apart from them. So here's the thing. Under him, Confucianism was suppressed because Confucianism is a strictly Chinese cultural aspect. He ends the examination system and creates a new social hierarchy where Mongols are on top, and then all other foreigners, Northern Chinese because they were defeated sooner, and then the Southern Chinese because they were defeated last. That would be the Song. There are no Chinese in top government posts, and the Mongols believed that foreigners were more trustworthy. The Yuan Dynasty, especially Kublai, encouraged foreign trade and foreign merchants to live and work in China. So this is kind of a big deal because one thing we've been discussing are barbarians. People who are not Chinese under previous dynasties are not to be trusted. Under the Yuan Dynasty, they're very much in favor of foreigners living in China. The Mongolian peace, Pax Mongolica, continues to thrive. And they did launch 2 failed invasions of Japan. Never worked. Japan was never taken over. It's not just the fact that the Mongols are stronger militarily than they are through the Navy. There was also a massive storm that destroyed a number of Mongol ships. Mongols could not settle in China. And under Kublai, and this carried on, intermarriage between Mongols and Chinese was forbidden. They promoted Taoism and Buddhism, but not Confucianism. And Mongol women refused to adopt Chinese customs. They retained their influential status in China, and they also resisted foot binding. The Mongol conquest opened up overland trade and brought unprecedented commercial integration into Eurasia. The growth of long-distance trade under the Mongols led to significant transfer of military and scientific knowledge among Europe, the Middle East, China, Iran, and Japan. Guys, these are your key concepts, so make sure you're writing this down or something. It stimulated European ambitions to find easier passages to Asia. And in addition, guys, it's introducing this technology from Asia to the rest of the world. You've got gunpowder, starts from the Tang. Pardon me. The song turned into a weapon. The idea for the printing press, because you've got wood block press printing originating in Korea, making it to Japan, and then eventually making its way to Europe. Pasta. Pasta was created in China, and then it's eventually taken to Italy. Naval technology improves. And all of this was brought to Europe by a Venetian explorer named Marco Polo, who travels through China between 1271 and 1295. Unfortunately, diseases such as the bubonic plague spread over the trade routes originated in the Mongol Empire. The plague that lingered in southwest China was transferred to central and north China, and then eventually, because of trading, to the Mediterranean world, from the Mediterranean to the rest of Europe. So take a look at Marco Polo's travels. Very impressive. Kublai understood and he practiced Chinese traditions of government in order to really solidify his rule. He constructed the Chinese-style capital at Beijing and then a summer capital where he and other nobles could practice riding and shooting. When the Mongols came to China, you guys already know there was quite a bit of political fragmentation. The Jin and the Southern Song were the top two rulers, but you also had the Tangut. The Mongols unified these states and actually restored and preserved some traditional and characteristic features of Chinese government, but they also made innovations on their own. And these included centralized appointment of officials, the use of Western Asian Muslims as officials, and a system of legally defined status groups in terms of race and function. Under the Yuan, again, Confucians had a relatively weak role because Confucianism was suppressed. So these Confucian officials really have no place in government. But the status of merchants, which in Confucianism, they're the parasites of society because they're not contributing anything, they're quite elevated because they're the ones who are bringing in the new goods, the new knowledge, new technology. Also, the status of doctors was elevated because they're the ones who are keeping everybody healthy. By attracting many non-Chinese to serve in the empire, the Yuan regime became a truly cosmopolitan entity. You've got lots of different people from lots of different cultures coming in. You've got Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Taoists coming together and functioning in one place. Under the rule, China's cities and ports prospered, trade recovers, it bounces back, and merchants flourish. The flourishing mercantile economy led to the Chinese gentry elite moving into cities. So you have suddenly this mass development of a very lively urban culture. You have literature. You have the Mandarin dialect of Chinese developing. In rural areas, you have cotton growing, spinning, and weaving being introduced to mainland China. You have the Mongols encouraging the construction of irrigation systems. That being said, in general, farmers in the Yuan Dynasty were overtaxed and brutalized. So, in short, the Yuan Dynasty are more concerned about a trade economy than they are an agricultural economy. During the Yuan period, China's population declined by about 40%. Northern China sees the greatest loss. Possible reasons for this, you've got warfare, the flooding of the Yellow River because the dams were neglected. You have north to south migration, the spread of disease, that bubonic plague, but you also, again, when you're not focusing on agriculture and more on trade, you do have an issue. Do we have enough food for everyone? Guys, this is pretty impressive. Look at their dynasty. The fall of the Yuan, this is our last slide for today. In 1368, the Chinese leader Zhu Yanghang brought an end to years of chaos and rebellion. He overthrows the Mongols and establishes the Ming Empire. And he takes the name Hongwu as his imperial name. His regime established his capital at Nanjing and made great efforts to reject the culture of the Mongols. They're closing off trade relations with Central Asia and the Middle East. They're bringing back Confucian ideology, which will actually bolster the position of the emperor. The Ming Empire was threatened on its northeastern borders by the Jurchens of Manchuria. The Jurchens had been influenced by the Mongolian culture, and they did pose a very significant threat to the Ming by the 1400s. The Mongols continued to hold power in Mongolia and Central Asia. From there, they're able to disrupt overland Eurasian trade and threaten the Ming Dynasty. We'll pick up with Ming China at our next podcast. So if you have any questions, email me. And as always, have a great night, guys. Cheers.